Go.
Thank you very much, Anne, not only for the introduction and letting us know about things, but also for your help putting on this entire series. You were very instrumental in organizing this all. And if you are here today watching this presentation, then you're likely to be interested in the other presentations that were part of this series, going all the way back a couple of months. We've had basically one every month, going back to the MCLE Spectacular. The first presentation was on developing the theory of your case. Then we had discovery and depositions, then framing the issues and drafting pleadings, then jury selection, opening, closing statements, direct exam, cross-examination and objections, effective use of ADR, and then today we have creating trial presentations. And this series was actually put on by one of the companies that's presenting today. One of the presenters is here from iPro, Ethan Hirsch, and iPro was a sponsor, and without that assistance, without the sponsor, this series would not have happened. So thank you very much to iPro, and we look forward to hearing more about what iPro has to offer for litigators. They're a company that provides services that are very helpful to lawyers that do trials. So actually, before we get into it, what might be helpful, we don't have a crazy number of people. If people want to put into the chat the area of practice that they are, and perhaps us presenters can, do our best to gear it towards you. We obviously have our outline that we prepared ahead of time that we'll be going through, but if there's, practice areas that you're in, maybe we can offer some tips for trial presentations in those practice areas. And of course, feel free to put in any questions into the chat or into the question and answer area. And to introduce myself more fully, I'm Adam Carlson. I'm one of the managing partners of Casper, Meadows, Schwartz & Cook, and the law firm is a personal injury and wrongful death law firm. And I've been at the firm for a number of years now, and I must say it is the most rewarding job that I've ever had by far, representing individuals who've gone through what's likely the worst thing they've ever gone through in their life, and getting them a life-changing amount of money is very rewarding. Prior to this job, I was in the Alameda County Public Defender's Office, which was the most interesting job I've ever had. The stories that come out of the Public Defender's Office are just the best. So to introduce the other two panelists today, as I mentioned, we have Ethan Hirsch from iPro. He's going to be talking about trial presentation software. And as they say, this is trial presentation software that wins cases. And there's a lot of reasons why you're going to want to learn as much as you can about trial presentation software. You're going to hear from Ethan about what it can do for you. But Ethan himself is a veteran of the U.S. military and a graduate of Arizona State University. For the past 7 years, Ethan has provided law firms, government agencies, and other litigation companies with training, consulting, and support using his knowledge of case management, e-discovery, trial preparation, and presentation. Prior to iPro, he spent 2 years as a paralegal assistant supporting all aspects of case management and deposition trial prep, which gave him good foundation to know how to assist lawyers and law firms. And he currently serves as a client success manager, supports trial technology consulting, providing in-depth and comprehensive assistance to law firms across the country. And an interesting fact about Ethan is within a 4-year period, he traveled to around 100 cities across the country. So if you want to know anything about the US, you should just hit him up and he'll let you know. And we have Nick Casper, who is managing partner of the best law firm in the country, managing partner at Casper, Meadows, Schwartz & Cook. He is an incredible partner to have. I'm very lucky to have him. He spent his entire career as at this firm doing personal injury and wrongful death, but he actually spends most of his free time chasing around his 2-year-old Remy. The interesting thing to know about Nick is that his birthday is May 6, 1978, and it's more easily known as 5678. So really easy to remember. And in fact, puts a lot of pressure on me to remember his birthday because I basically have no excuse for forgetting it. And also now you know his ATM pin, 5678. Nick's going to be covering exhibits, demonstratives, and visuals during trial, or in other words, powerful ways to wake your jury up. I'm going to get into my section of the presentation, and it's on effective use of PowerPoints. And I'm going to go over effective use of PowerPoints in opening and closing statements, and also the use of PowerPoints in general, which is a good life skill. So if you find yourself a 5th grader again, and you have to do show and tell presentation, you can wow the teacher with a masterful PowerPoint presentation. But no, we're gonna hear from an expert on PowerPoint presentations on some tips and tricks. You're gonna learn some things you've been doing wrong. Everyone has been doing a lot of things wrong with PowerPoint presentations. So you'll learn quite a bit about that. And I'm gonna be going over, ways that I use PowerPoint presentations to enhance my opening statements and my closing statements. And I think that opening statements is the most important part of the trial. I firmly believe that is the point in which the jury makes up their mind about which way they are leaning, about which way they are going to end up voting, and then they view the evidence throughout the entire trial through that lens. So it's the first time you're talking to the jury about your case, first time they're going to hear from you about what this case involves, other than some, things you've hinted at in voir dire. But this is the first time they're hearing about it, hearing about what you have to say, hearing about why you're in court, and so it's a very important part of the case. And just general things about openings. Something I learned from one of my first supervisors in the public defender's office, who was actually one of the most well-known public defenders in the country, Chuck Denton, and one of the best trial lawyers in the country. He used to talk all the time about the use of 3, just using 3 themes. Come up with your 3 themes, and then pretty much gear every part of your trial, every piece of your evidence to fit into one of those 3 categories. And I don't think Chuck invented that because I've heard it elsewhere, but it's really a good rule of thumb. In a ways, it also makes things less stressful for you in trial, helps you kind of whittle down your evidence to decide what's important. If it doesn't fit into one of your 3 themes, maybe you don't want to deal with it. Maybe you don't want to, go there. And also, it helps keep you organized in a way. You have a goal in mind for what you want to get out of each witness. You sit down and you have your expert coming up, or an expert you're going to cross, or a witness you're going to call, and you got to think about, things you want to cover with them. And, we all know that jury's attention span is short, so we want to keep it short and sweet. And so just keep those 3 themes in mind, and you start with the 3 themes in opening. So why PowerPoint? Getting into, what I'm going to be teaching you all about with PowerPoint, why PowerPoint? And I'm sure you all know that people are visual learners. I found on a random blog that they said the majority of the population are visual learners, and research has found that 65% of the general population are visual learners. And the research further found that people retain 80% of what they see compared to 20% of what they read and only 10% of what they hear. And I was kidding, it's actually not a random blog, but it was actually legitimate research done by a reputable publication in the business world. And so to repeat again, the important aspect of this is the research found that people return 80% of what they see and only 10% of what they hear. And I think you all know this. You know that people are visual learners, especially with how powerful, graphics can be, how powerful images can be. And Nick is going to get into, good ways to come up with, powerful demonstratives and things like that. But the statistics are quite astonishing that people retain 80% of what they see, but only 10% of what they hear. So from my perspective, you have to be doing a PowerPoint and you have to be doing it at opening. I think a lot of attorneys, they wait until closing. That's when they first do a PowerPoint. They don't do one in opening. I think that's a mistake. Like I said, opening is the most important part of the trial. You want to show them what your case is about. You want to show them with visuals. You want to just make sure that they are, hearing what you want them to hear. So with a little bit more about just PowerPoints in general, because I think, you should be using PowerPoint. I'm not aware of other, software out there that really competes with PowerPoint if you want to do an opening statement and have, seamless transitions of your photos and videos and things like that. I think it is very important to know the basics, not just the basics, the best way to effective use of PowerPoint. As I said, many people do it wrong, and I'm going to play a video, an interview with one of the world's leading experts on PowerPoints, and also somebody I think you'll all agree is just an incredible human being.
Could one of the attendees, or could the attendees just, when we play the video, could you please just let us know quickly in the chat if you can or can't hear it? Maybe Drew or Ann or someone could just let me know quickly in the chat if you can or can't hear it.
Hi, welcome to our very special guest, Linda K. Carlson. If you could just introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, I'm Linda Carlson. I'm lucky enough to be Adam's mom. I love him dearly, as all mothers do their children, and I'm very proud of him.
All right, Mom, stay focused. We need to stay on script here. No, enough of that lovey-dovey stuff. So,
okay.
I've asked you here because I think you have some good tips and tricks on effective PowerPointing, and you've helped me in the past with my PowerPoints. What's your experience teaching about PowerPoints? What's your experience with PowerPoints?
Most of my experience of using PowerPoints is after I was a classroom teacher, I became a college professor. And most of my use of PowerPoints is I've taught college students how to use them in their classrooms. So most of this comes from when I've been teaching my college students how to use them effectively in their classrooms.
Got it. Well, we've prepared a PowerPoint. Let's get right to it. Hopefully that's seen up on the screen. This is a PowerPoint on the do's and don'ts of PowerPoints. And it looks like, Mrs. Carlson, that you have a bunch of initials after your name. Congratulations. I think you have more initials than both of your sons combined. How did you pull that off?
Well, I started collecting masters. I thought it was a fun thing to do. Got approved for a couple of doctorates and decided not to go the full way. So well, Adam decided to list some of my masters that I have. I have a couple of others, but I told him to stop at 3.
Well, if that's your definition of fun, then you're really fun.
Well, so I do other things for fun, but they weren't suitable for the screen.
Okay. Well, let's get right into it. Let's get into a do. What do you have to say about this?
Do keep your content brief whenever you make a PowerPoint. You don't want people to read a whole bunch of screens. You want to keep your content brief and to the point, almost as a reminder to you why you're doing a PowerPoint. For example, you don't want a PowerPoint like this. Adam, you want to read the title for me?
Yeah, Chilean exports, which is a topic I'm sure you're an expert on, Mrs. Carlson. But
I was, but you don't want a screen like this because there's just too much information about it. You want to keep it very, very brief. because you don't want the people to try to read all of this. You rather just talk about it. So don't have a screen like this, but rather have a screen that looks like this.
Got it. So with a screen like this, are you still conveying that same content as the other slide?
I am, but instead I'm talking about it and I'm letting my students take notes about it. But I don't want them to read about it. If I wanted to read about it, I would give them an assignment. But instead I'm talking about it, what are the top Chilean exports, and what the US as a market does for the exports.
Got it. Okay, so we keep the content brief. What's next?
Next is you want to keep your audience focused, so use a consistent font and background. That sort of goes, Adam, do we have our themes here, or is that later?
That's point number 4, I think.
Okay, so I'll go back to that when we talk about the themes.
Okay, and what does that mean to black out the screen?
A blackout screen is when I have a screen that's totally black out, so I have time to think, to talk about what I need to, and if I need to, answer questions. Adam, I think you use the blackout screen a little differently than I do.
That's right. So when I'm doing a PowerPoint in opening or closing, and I want to have the focus on me, maybe make a dramatic point, you can black out the screen so that the PowerPoint isn't displaying anymore. And there's shortcuts to do that on the keyboard. And you can Google what the shortcut is. But essentially, you're making your point, you're going through your PowerPoint, and then you want to be a little dramatic. You black it out. That turns the focus on you. When there's a PowerPoint up on the screen on the projector, even though you're talking, the audience, the jury, whoever it is going to be looking at the PowerPoint. It's just natural to look there. So you can black out the screen quickly and then just easily turn it back on. There's a quick shortcut button to be able to do that. What's next?
Keep it simple. I cannot stress this enough. A PowerPoint is not to convey a whole lot of information. It's almost like doing bullet points for you. So you want to keep it simple, and it reminds you what you want to get to your audience. And it just as it says, I'm going to keep this simple because I want you to keep it simple.
Got it. What does this relate to?
There are different themes that can be used for each PowerPoint. You want to find the theme that you feel most comfortable with. Some are cheery, some are sad, some are focused. Find the theme that works for you. Adam, can you show where you find the different themes on a PowerPoint, please?
Oh gosh, you're testing me. Okay.
I am.
Got it. So, and by theme, you're not talking about content theme, you're talking about visual theme?
A visual theme for your PowerPoint.
Got it. So
right over top, you go on to design.
Okay, up on the top, the tab that says design.
And look at all the different things you get to choose from. And there are so many more. So choose a theme that you want to work with. And that theme is going to be consistent throughout your PowerPoint.
Got it. Okay, where were we?
Not on you. We've seen enough of you. Let's go back to our PowerPoint.
Okay. I think that's up there. 1 second. We did keep content brief. We did blackout screen. What do you mean by this?
Make yourself the focus. You don't want them reading the screen. You don't want them looking around. You're doing the PowerPoint because you have something to say. So make sure you're the focus. That's why you don't want to make the screen busy. That's why you want to keep it simple. That's why you're doing the PowerPoint, to keep yourself the focus.
Got it. Now
There's some don'ts that go along with this. All the don'ts are a way to keep yourself the focus. The first don't is, don't clutter the slides. Don't put too much on them. That's not the point. This is not the point to fill up all the information you had. I know you're smart. I know you know a lot. This isn't the time to show me that. Just don't clutter the slides.
Got it.
Like
so this is a reminder of a bad example here.
Don't use a tiny font. You want the people in the back of the, look, I whispered it because it was so tiny. You want the people in the back of the room to see the font. Don't read from the slide. I have to tell you, I've seen presentations and that's the worst thing presenters do. Number one, you shouldn't have enough words on it that you need to read from it. Number two, I should look at it quickly. I remember what it says, and then I'm talking to my audience. I'm not reading from my slide. Oh my God, when that stops moving, it's going to tell you, don't over animate. That's the worst thing third graders do. They love to animate. You're not in third grade anymore. You're lawyers. Don't over animate. And don't use overly complex diagrams. If you have a diagram that's really complex, then you make it and you put it on the side and you do a point-by-point presentation. A PowerPoint is not where it belongs.
Got it. Okay, well.
I hope that helped all of you.
Thank you very much. Do you, how much do you charge for consultations for lawyers that are getting ready for trial?
Oh, you know what? Adam does the charging. I do this all for free because I want every lawyer to be successful and happy and glad that they chose this profession.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mrs. Carlson. You're amazing.
Thank you very much. And so are you, son.
Okay. Hopefully you learned a little bit about PowerPoints. Can't be emphasized enough. Don't put too much on there. Don't read from it. Don't have lengthy paragraphs. It's just really, really not good. So that was some tips and tricks on doing PowerPoints. And I do actually really like making PowerPoints. So if you want to run a PowerPoint by me, you're getting ready for a trial, I'm happy to take a look at it. I know a lot of the functionality of PowerPoints, which is a really effective way to you know, show the jury and open and convey what you want to convey, your three themes. And in terms of things to put onto a PowerPoint, you know, obviously photographs are great. Video depositions, I do a lot of video depositions, pretty much videotape all of my depositions, and it's, you never know, I do it because you never know when you're going to get a great moment. And if you get the defendant or some witness or somebody to say something great for the case, and you can play it in an opening statement, the jury hears it before they hear anything else, you're just way ahead. So you can play those in opening statements. So, you know, sometimes if it's like a causation issue or something, or there's something where, you know, the expert witness, you know, you're going to use an expert witness later on. For example, I videotape all my treating physicians ahead of time. I do their direct examination on videotape. And then if there's like a causation issue for the trial, then, you know, just an opening, I have them, you know, I play their testimony regarding causation just right up front, and you know, the jury sees it right away. It's not buried later on in day 3 of your trial. So other things to include in your PowerPoint are demonstrative and video animations and things like that, and Nick is going to go over some good examples later on of what you might want to do. And then, you know, one thing I've been doing lately, you know, most cases settle, we all know that, but you want to settle for, you know, a really good amount favorable to your client. And I think one of the ways you do that is to show the other side that you're serious, show them you're ready for trial, that's how you think of the case. You think of the case like it's a trial case and nothing else. And you're going to be unreasonable to settle, and that's what it's going to take. So what I have been doing is I've been creating PowerPoint presentations 6 to 8 months ahead of trial. And it's not my final version, obviously, it gets tweaked, but I create something, send it to opposing counsel with an email that says, this is a draft of my opening PowerPoint presentations. Please let me know before motions in limine if you have any objections to the content so we can bring it up to the judge. And I think it shocks the other side that they get a opening statement PowerPoint. And it's kind of a way to, put your case out there too. The other side is gonna review it, and it's just like sort of another way to hit them with a mediation brief, but with photos and things like that. So I'm gonna run through quickly. I should pass it along soon to the other participants here. They have some good things to talk about, but I want to go through a PowerPoint I did for a recent case. The case was, we had just mediated the case and it didn't settle at mediation, and there was a mediator's number pending, and I wanted to just sort of show them that I was thinking about this as a trial case. So I prepared an opening PowerPoint and I sent it to them, and I'll kind of just crank through it, just show you generally how my PowerPoints look. So one thing I should tell you about, if you don't have that much experience with PowerPoint, then there's this function called presenter's view. And this is what you will see in presenter view. And then just the screen up in the top left is what the audience sees, what gets projected on the screen. And the benefit of this is that you get to make notes to yourself on the right and remind you of what you're going to say. So you say, this is what I'm going to say. And you have notes there. And then you also know what's coming up next. So if you want to introduce it, you can. So, up next, the next slide is incident impact. And so, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is the case of Jago versus Kezior, whatever. And this, the incident had a huge impact on the life of Mrs. Jago. I'm going to go through all the ways in which this incident impacted my client. And then you go to the next slide. So that's something you should practice with, the presenter view. You have to run through it a couple times, get used to using it, definitely practice your opening statement with people. That's advisable in general, but if you're doing something like a PowerPoint, you have to, because you might not notice some mistakes you've made in the PowerPoint, and that could, a grammatical error or a spelling error in a PowerPoint where there's such few words, it looks bad. So this was a PowerPoint again I made. So I ran through, 3 themes. She was happy and healthy, her life changed forever, and now she's in pain and miserable. And then I talked about how, prior to the incident, she was happy, she loved gardening. She was living her best life. She spent time with her, daughter. This is her daughter. She spent tons of time with her family all the time. She spent time with her grandkids. So these were all the things that, Mrs. Jago did before the incident, and she did it all the time. You're going to hear, in terms of the evidence of who Mrs. Jago was prior to May 1st, 2021, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to hear from Jason Jago, her son. And one of the things about these PowerPoints, I like using photos of people who are going to testify. If you have a doctor who's going to testify, take their headshot from their website, or if it's some other expert or professional, get a photo of them. I think it just, breeds familiarity. You want the jury to buy into what these people are saying, and the way that people often buy into what somebody's saying is just familiarity with them. If they're comfortable with them, they're more likely to believe them, things like that. So I like to show photos of, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to hear from Mrs. Jago's son, Jason. You're going to hear from her niece. You're going to hear from her daughter. You're going to hear from her husband. And then this, I incorporated a video of the incident. I actually had, this is kind of stepping on Nick's toes a little bit, but one demonstrative I had prepared for the case was in the top left of the video. You can see it's enhanced. It's still not great quality, but it does show a little bit about what happened. And this is a gentleman pushing a cart, and you can see it knocked over Mrs. Jago, and she broke a hip. She had 2 surgeries. And then I went into, obviously, for a personal injury case, you got to show injury photos. And then this, I know this goes against what Mrs. Carlson had to say, but this was intentional. The point of this was to show that there was a lot of care. Before the incident, she wasn't seeing doctors at all. Now look at the all these people she's seen, Mrs. Jago has seen. So this was actually intentional to have a busy slide, because it does convey that there was just a lot that she had to deal with. And then, more photos. These are obviously compelling photos. So, just going through, and then, listing again. And this was intentional, again, having a busy screen of all the activities she used to do, because it shows what her life is deprived of. And then I brought it back to where I started with my 3 themes. So that's an example of a PowerPoint that I use. Again, practice it for sure. Take advantage of the presenter view so you can make notes to yourself, and that way it really, you look good when you're presenting. I did mention in the video interview with my mom about blanking out the screen. I like to use that as well. You're going to have the PowerPoint up there. You're going to be going through it, and then you want the focus on you, and make a good point, whatever it is, so you can black out the screen. I think you push the letter B and it blacks it out, and then you turn it back on. So those are my tips and tricks on using PowerPoint and opening and closing. And then closing's not that much different. The one thing to be careful with is would be, when you're putting up jury instructions, sometimes some jury instructions are lengthy. There are multiple paragraphs. It's a lot of content up there. You can do highlights. There's ways to highlight and call out text, things like that. And then, I do think what's really important is to do, let me show you this. This was from a trial I had. I think it is good to go through the verdict form. That's obviously a very important document. So you should definitely go over that with the jury on the PowerPoint. And I'm sorry, I'm not. So then let me just show you. And then, of course, highlight the point you want to highlight. The first screen I had, it was a lot of content. It was just to make a point, show the jury, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is what you're going to get, and then highlight what you want to talk about. So I do think it's important to go over the verdict form in your closing. Other than that, the advice is still essentially the same. 3 themes. Don't have busy slides. Keep the content on it short, and you're the highlight. Make the focus you. So that's what I wanted to go over with opening and closing PowerPoints. Like I said, I'm happy to hear your opening, hear your closing, and hear your see your PowerPoint and help in any regard. And next up, we're going to hear from Ethan. I introduced him earlier. He's from iPro. He's going to be talking about Trial Director 360. And there's a lot of stressful things about trial. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, it's like herding cats. Well, I think of trial as like herding cats on steroids, between tracking down witnesses, getting documents all together, having your exhibits in order, the document that clerk asked you to provide her last week with the names of the people you're going to call on day 3, and lodging the transcripts. And of course, oh yeah, remembering to even tell your client the trial is happening. I mean, it's just so busy. And what Trial Director 360 and the products that iPro offer just relieves so much of the stress that comes with organizing everything you need to organize for trial. And so that's worth it right there. Spend time worrying about what questions you're going to ask or not to ask on cross-examination, rather than, trying to figure out how you're going to pull up that transcript from that deposition when you get to impeachment. So I'm going to hand it over to Ethan, and he'll take it from there.
All right. I'm sharing my screen. Maybe Ann, if you want to let me know if you can see my screen, just to confirm.
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right, great. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Ethan Hirsch. I'm a client success manager here at iProTech, and I've been working in the field of litigation for almost 8 years, actually. So I started off in the law firm setting, kind of learned litigation, discovery, best practices in preparation for trial, and then went over to Indata Corporation, later on to iProTech, who are the makers, obviously, of trial presentation software, e-discovery software, information governance software. We basically have the entire EDRM covered as far as software. Software in general is definitely a huge benefit to just litigation in general, and especially for e-discovery and trial. So what I'm going to be showing today and sharing with you, just kind of an overview, from a 10,000-foot view, is going to be our trial presentation software. It's referred to as Trial Director 360. Trial Director has been on the market for well over 25 years now, and it's been used in some of the biggest high-profile cases around it. And recently, the Johnny Depp defamation case actually was they used a version of Trial Director as well. So you may have seen the presentation software, not knowing what it was, but it was definitely used in very high-profile cases. So definitely a huge benefit. And in combination to what kind of Adam was talking about with PowerPoint and a trial presentation platform such as Trial Director, it's a huge benefit. And it's not just for trial. There's a misconception that, because trial is in the name, it's just for trial. It's not. It's for arbitrations, mediations, depositions, and obviously a trial, whether that's going to be a bench or jury. So I'm going to kind of go into a little bit within the application, just kind of show you the ins and outs and what these programs are capable of doing. Every trial presentation software, is capable of great things. Obviously, Trial Director 360, feature-wise, presentation-wise, workflows, templates, just overall best practices, and just the presentation screen alone, definitely are a lot better than what else is out there on the marketplace. So I will go ahead and begin. So once again, sharing my screen, and then feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll be happy to answer those questions maybe at the completion of this presentation. So Trial Director is broken up into 2 different components. You have the manager or the case manager, where you're basically setting the table for the evidence that's going to be ingested in. And then you have the evidence module. And the evidence module is essentially the repository or the container of that actual evidence. And the evidence that you would import in is typically image-based document files, PDFs, JPEGs, PNGs, TIFFs, so on and so forth. And you also can support your native Office application files like Excels, Words, PowerPoints as well. And then also multimedia files, audio, video files, and then also your deposition transcripts, as Adam talked about. He videotapes every single deposition. Well, we can take that videotape deposition, and we can essentially have the ability to contain a digital video transcript, which is going to be text and video, where we can actually present excerpts based on that video testimony as well. And we'll kind of go into that in just a little bit. And the evidence module is also where you would access the presentation screen, which we'll kind of start off today's demonstration of this product here. And the reason that we start off within the presentation screen is because this is the bread and butter of the application. It's essentially where you're going to showcase your electronic form of evidence, and to include documents, multimedia, transcripts, and so on and so forth. So it is a black screen, and you have the little taskbar there. You can obviously reform it or change the backgrounds to your specifications, but obviously simplicity is the best, as what was talked about before. So you have the ability to showcase static linear presentations like that of PowerPoint, but also be dynamic. And you can be proactive and reactive with these kind of approaches to presentation, essentially a different mode. And we can begin to identify documents or records using IDs that we have programmed for these records. So these can be exhibit number 1. We can easily transition to another document and exhibit number 5. And then let's go ahead and transition, let's say, to exhibit number 10. All I'm doing is just typing in values, and those documents are being presented via the presentation screen. Instead of scrambling through banker's boxes or folders, I'm able just to identify these records and have them presented in front of the audience that you're sharing, throughout the room, in front of the jury, the judge, the audience, so on and so forth. Dynamically speaking, what we can do is we can work with those records. So we have the ability to, let's say, go to a second page. So let's go back to exhibit number 1, and let's talk about, let's say, the second page here. So we can also proactively, as I mentioned, place annotations on those documents, kind of prepare with annotations ready to go. And then from there, be dynamic using our call out tool to enhance the presentation. So we now can talk about how Jay Carnes forged his signature for Roger W. Briggs, who was the executive officer at the time. And dynamically speaking, once again, we can kind of resize, reshape, reform, kind of move things around, and then maybe go back to the original document. And let's go to, the first page. We can go to a specific page if we wanted to as well. So let's go to page 5. Of this multi-page document. It could be 200 pages, 1,000 pages. We have these very large PDFs, that people love to work with. Well, we can present those 1,000 pages really easily. So let's go back to page number 1, as I mentioned, and we have some exhibit labeling that we can also create and apply. And let's talk about colors. So the visual. So we talked about visuals earlier in this presentation. Visual cues. People remember visuals, and especially color codes. So this program has the ability to not only highlight things, really easily in yellow, a neutral kind of base color. So we're talking about 3323 State Street, Santa Barbara here. But let's go ahead and change the color on the fly. And now let's talk about this address right here, red. So what that means is it's impactful, it's negative, it's a disadvantage. Red means stop, right? You're going to remember that. So you can change things on the fly rapidly and present them really easily, and kind of customize your toolbar to your specifications. Not only that, but we have the ability to split screen, so we can bring things from one portion of the screen and call out, let's say, another document, exhibit 10, bring things forward, relate it to a certain issue or event, related to the case at hand, and then just go ahead and bring it back when we're doing it. And a majority of these things that I've done up until this point, by the way, are all keyboard actions. So you really have the ability to kind of control and kind of command the presentation just from your laptop, your presentation kind of tool, your hardware, essentially. So not only at document level can we present, but more so kind of in an ordered fashion. This is going to be key here, really based off outlines. So we can present these exhibits in an order, let's say in preparation for a direct examination. So Nick or Adam created an outline for a direct examination. That witness is going to hit the stand, and we're going to go ahead and prepare this outline via the presentation. And I'm just going to go ahead and transition to that kind of folder here. So at the lower left-hand corner, I just kind of transitioned over to Michael Poley's folder. So he's approaching the stand. We're going to go ahead and do a direct. And we're just going to begin to identify records in order. Obviously, on the fly is going to be key here in case we need to go outside of this folder. We can easily do that. But if we were to stay in line with this outline, very, very simplistic in regards to presentation. So we'll go ahead and maybe circle something here. Let's do a quick call out and relate it to the issue, related to damages, which is going to be the actual accident scene itself. So we'll go ahead and transition and kind of move this around here. I'm kind of moving things around, transitioning just like that. And we kind of wind up here at, State Street and Loretto Plaza, where, the vehicle stopped and the criminal was apprehended after the accident. So from there, we can talk about the damages, being that the vehicle themselves had impact. And then we can do some comparisons between, the right and left-hand side. And then let's actually talk about damages, the actual issue of damages, whether maybe it's compensatory, lost wages, punitive damages. So, they were talking about X-rays earlier in relation to the lady's unfortunate accident that occurred in that shopping center. Well, we can take that and kind of enhance the presentation. We can show kind of comparisons between X-ray 1 here on the left-hand side, and then drop it over here to X-ray 2 on the left-hand side and say, okay, well, here's the damage, and then here's the reconstructive surgery that that took place afterwards. And then we're talking about the surgery that happened and the physical therapy and all this, the monetary values assigned or associated with it. So we have the ability to kind of create this kind of presentation. We also have the ability to kind of create snippets of these presentations. This is going to be a static version. So things that we present, we can also create a historical log or record. We can also admit documents into an electronic kind of virtual record, so to speak, as well. This was the exact same record that I presented, but I just created it proactively. And it kind of shares, or shows the emphasis of this here. And we can then place those on, let's say, rebuttals, or we can even place it in closing arguments as well, in preparation with our PowerPoint that we can present at the end of the trial. Not only that, but we also have not just static versions, but dynamic versions here. So we can kind of continuously work with, the form of evidence as if we, kind of never left. So we're kind of moving things around here, repositioning, so on and so forth. Next is going to be audio video. So we have the ability to present. Let me go ahead and make sure. Okay. We have the ability to present audio video files. So we can just present video if we want, or videos that contain audio. This one doesn't contain any audio. We have multimedia running at the lower right-hand side. And, we still have the ability to kind of use our presentation tools. Let me get rid of that, change my annotation, and we can kind of blow up sections. And then we also have the ability to kind of move things around. We go ahead and resume the video. So surveillance footage, just as is impactful with live video. So we can kind of move things around here. Shift things from looking at smokestacks, that are currently on fire, or smokestacks that are not on fire as well. So let me go ahead and pause this video. And the last video here that we can go ahead and, the last thing that I'll kind of show in the presentation screen is going to be an excerpt of video testimony. So if we have the ability to show transcriptions as well as video. But if combined, which is referred to as a digital video transcript, we can also present excerpts that are based off designations, which are simply put page and lines that have been created as a clip. So our exhibit that we're going to go ahead and present also contains a synchronized exhibit. So we can, as mentioned at the time of the deposition, we can have that form of presentation automate and present it via the presentation screen. I'm sharing audio, so you should be able to hear this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you subcontract your services to any business or corporation, or is it only for your own corporation?
Oh, just for me. That's all. We get retained by the outside, but we're an independent firm.
Okay. We've marked as Exhibit A a copy of the deposition notice.
So Ricky Sarkeesian at the time of the deposition, he's looking at that exhibit, and we're having that presented for you. So it's very visual and very entertaining as well, which is key. And because you have a visual aspect, they're going to, the jury is going to remember those exhibits, and they know nothing about your case, obviously, from the start of it, but at the end, they'll know a lot. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and transition back into the dashboard here. So real quickly, obviously, I don't want to take up too much more time. So really, things are kind of separated, as I mentioned. I think my video or sharing screen is kind of slowing things down a little bit. Hold on one second. And can you still hear me? Just wanted to make sure.
Yes, can hear you
Okay.
and see you. All
right.
The attendees good too? Someone just let me know in the chat.
Trying to stop my video. I think it's kind of slowing things down a little bit.
It doesn't seem to be.
Okay. Just kind of with Zoom.
It looks
and
like we're
video
okay.
Yeah, and video sharing, it kind of freezes things a little bit here. Give me a second real quick. I apologize.
Okay, yeah, take a minute. If you need to get out of everything and get back in, that's fine too.
Yeah. One sec. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right, so let me just log back in or access the application. I'm going to go ahead and stop my video as well. So obviously, we're dealing with a lot of applications here, Zoom in combination with 360 and Outlook Open, Internet Explorer, so on and so forth. So obviously impacts when you're actually in trial. You're ideally not going to be connected to the internet. You're going to be kind of just running essential applications like PowerPoint and Trial Director 360 is really what it comes down to. So in this kind of demonstration format, obviously not ideal, but let me just kind of launch the application again, and we'll go ahead and reshare my screen. Just give me a sec. And should have it up. And looks like, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right, very good. All right, so back on track here. So the case manager is kind of the initiation of the case. And within the case manager here, you have the ability to really apply details and information related to the case. So details related to the case here. You can also invite team members. You can collaborate on the same case, associate the parties, create issues for management purposes of your evidence. Designations, probably the biggest feature transcript-wise of transcript management. And then finally, exhibit stickers to go ahead and apply to your image-based documents. And you can code these or kind of form them to your specifications based off of the district or superior or state court, local courts, whatever the case may be. And then you can go ahead and apply those exhibit stickers in bulk actually as well. And it's dynamic, so if you make any changes to that label, it would also update as well. So within the evidence module where we accessed the presentation screen earlier, the evidence module is essentially kind of the container of all the evidence. So, and things are broken up into explorers based on evidence and work products. So we have documents and transcripts. If I wanted to add explorers related to multimedia, here's multimedia, which I have imported files. If you deal with like patent litigation or expert reports, we also have an expert report way to classify a report and kind of related to the tables, the figures, so on and so forth. And then we can use that method to present into the main presentation screen. I just launched the presentation screen again, which also came up with a preview screen. So we do have the ability also, to prepare evidence in a preview method here and talk about this, VL table. And then when ready, we can go ahead and present it to the main presentation screen, which here via the main presentation screen we were in earlier, we would use this method to present via the presentation screen directly. So you would kind of use this as an action to prepare evidence, and then essentially present it in kind of a preformed or a way of preparing the evidence ahead of the actual presentation. So in documents here, you can launch documents, you can code documents for methods of identifying or labeling documents, and you can then search those records or those properties. Workbooks, as I mentioned here, in the presentation screen, you have that Michael Poley workbook where we can place items into a specified order and present those. As mentioned earlier, we have the ability to admit documents into the 360 record, so to speak. And then we can go ahead and even publish a report of admissions. And the admission report and reports in general are very nice to have as far as, you know, what you can report on. So I want to report on the admitted date, or have that as kind of the sorting option and filled and in ordering options as well, and present that so you don't have to do the pen and pad method. Everything is going to be essentially electronic within this database. So documents, you can go ahead and kind of organize transcripts as well. And transcripts can be placed in here at a regular text file transcript level and or a digital video transcript if it's been synchronized with text and video. So that same Ricky Sarkeesian deposition that we have that we showed earlier, you can begin to apply work product. So transcript management is going to be big in this application, which is, in depositions are formal, you know, discovery, part of formal discovery. So they're going to be huge within your presentation. So we can begin to identify issues, which once you identify an issue, it's going to be recorded into a folder here. You can import designations in bulk, which obviously are disclosed. And then you can take these issues or designations and you can turn them into clips, which then makes them presentable. So we can, you know, place these clips on the presentation screen. We can edit these clips via the Clips Explorer. So if I want to, you know, take a look at this clip over here, here's going to be that transcript preview. We can also create the clip and cut out inaudibles. So the ums, the okays, we can exclude objections, have a little bit more automation in a sense of exclusion factors, you know, what's been ruled on, the timings, you know, if you have inaudibles or no audio whatsoever, you know, for 15, 20, 30 seconds, we can cut that out because it's really not that important. And then within that clip here, we do have the ability to even exclude or remove from a segment essentially, or remove it from the clip entirely. So if there's text that we want to take out, we have the ability to do that as well. And then a few other things in regards to transcript management, you know, speaking of text or kind of removing it, is redactions. So we have the ability to also exclude redactions based on privilege, trade secret, you know, confidential information. And so to get there, obviously we can run searches. So we can, you know, search for the term exhibit here and see how many times it was referenced via, you know, I'm just doing a quick search, but we also have the ability to, you know, launch a word index, and then I can see, you know, hey, that same word exhibit here was mentioned 6 times. What's hyperlinked to that section of text? And then we can link exhibits, as you see here. We can synchronize exhibits for presentation purposes, or if on the fly, excuse me, on the fly method, we have the ability to create presentation clips as well, essentially sending it directly to the presentation screen for impeachment purposes. So a lot of a lot of transcript action and management are taking place, and the most important part of this application really is the timing. You know, you don't want to wait last minute, excuse me, you know, a day before trial. The reality is that a lot of programs like Trial Director are picked up, you know, right before the presentation event. But if you're proactive with it, you can have a very strong case. And those clips that were mentioned on the PowerPoint, those excerpts, we have the ability to also export. About 95% of this work product can be exported outside the database. So you can export media clips that you can edit. So you can take in, you know, parent files and edit those clips and export it outside the database. Those clips at a transcript level can also be exported outside of the database as well, just for sharing purposes, disclosure, or just general viewing outside the database, for example, within a PowerPoint presentation. So, programs like this are essential to the presentation method of the overall litigation case. And it's very entertaining, very rewarding. And discovery gets you to trial, trial wins the case. So I definitely want to use electronic forms of presentation, whether that's going to be Trial Director 360 or PowerPoint, as well as some other applications out there in combinations. So I think that about does it for me. And I guess I'll hand it over to Nick. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. All right.
All right. Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah.
So Ethan covered software that can be incredibly powerful in prosecuting your case, or whichever side of the V you're on, culminating in a trial, but also would be very effective throughout the trial process. And demonstratives, we tend to think of demonstratives as being for trial, and that's generally true. I'm going to be backing up talking about demonstratives generally, what they are, and how we get them into trial, specifically kind of the standards from admissibility as well as foundation to get those demonstrative evidence items into trial. But I did want to mention, and Adam and Ethan touched on this, demonstrative evidence can be incredibly powerful at any time in your case. It doesn't help your client to hold back all of this really compelling evidence, demonstrative evidence, until the very end when the case has gone all the way to a jury trial. It can be used to persuade the other side well in advance of that. One natural point that often comes up in our cases is that of mediation. We will often have already retained our accident reconstruction experts, and we've already retained experts in animation. And for example, in a contested liability case of who caused an accident, that's a great time to share that animation that your expert has created, showing why your client was not at fault and the other side was at fault. And you're also free of a lot of the standards that I'm about to hit on in terms of admissibility and foundation. There's not going to be any objections with the judge ruling on it. Of course, you want to keep it colorably believable, and you want to have it as admissible as possible, but that just isn't quite the concern at that juncture. Adam also mentioned he brings this evidence to the other side, sometimes at a demand stage even, before the case is even filed. So it's never too early to get a jump on your demonstrative evidence. I don't think it is a good habit to get in the focus of just we're scrambling as we're getting before trial with our demonstrative evidence. But first, as I mentioned, what is demonstrative evidence? We've been saying it at different times. I think it helps to go over that law school refresher and then talk a little bit about how we get it into trial. So first of all, demonstrative evidence. Let me share screen before I get into my PowerPoint. Here we go. Slideshow. All right. So demonstrative evidence is physical evidence that illustrates testimony. It's that simple. It is almost always coming in through a witness's testimony. Actually, I'd say it is always coming through a witness's testimony. Examples, this is a non-exhaustive list, but things like maps, charts, timelines, diagrams, models, demonstrations, experiments, and the demonstrations and experiments, those could be in or out of court. Of course, if they're out of court, you probably have videotaped the demonstration or experiment. For example, we have gone to site inspections and had experts done experiments at the scene. And when we're in trial showing that video, that is demonstrative evidence. In terms of admissibility, it's as admissible as the testimony that it is coming through. So if a witness's testimony, for example, an expert's testimony, has already been deemed to be admissible, then it is likely that that demonstrative evidence will be admissible. But you still need to lay the proper foundation. And in terms of admissibility, oftentimes we're talking about exclusions under Evidence Code 352. Some common ways of exclusion for demonstrative evidence could be matters of opinion. So for example, if you had a case where one of the disputed issues was a organizational chart, and one of the disputed issues was if someone was someone's supervisor, and you introduced a organizational chart where it basically embraces your version of that disputed fact by having that supervisor where you want them to be, that could be exceeding the proper purpose of a demonstrative evidence. Similarly, argumentative, if the evidence goes simply beyond just illustrating testimony. All of these are very blurred lines, and as you might imagine, attorneys are often pushing the boundaries with it. But for example, if you had a product liability case and you had an illustration of some factory on a river, and in the sky were skull and crossbones, that would probably be deemed argumentative because you're going beyond being illustrative of testimony and you're going into the province of argument. Foundation, I think it really comes down to the two words in that second sentence, fair representation. It needs to be a fair representation of whatever the witness is describing. Many of these will be non-controversial. For example, if you have a timeline, the testimony that would be required to admit the timeline would be witness testimony. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. On the other hand, if it's something a bit more complicated, like an animation, you don't necessarily, and you probably won't need the actual illustrator, the animator, to say how they did it and what I went into Adobe Illustrator, etc. Nothing like that. You would need an accident reconstruction expert, for example, to say this video, this illustration or animation is a fair representation of the circumstances of the accident. So I'm going to talk about some types of demonstrative evidence, getting them into evidence, and talking about some cases in California that touch on this issue. Experiments, I've already talked about it. The experiment can be in and out of court. Often it's out of court because of the nature of experiments. It takes a lot of setup, and you're going to be playing a video to the jury of that experiment. And once again, has to be under substantial similar conditions. The case that's cited here, De Rosario, it's a really interesting case, and I want to just kind of touch on it because it hits on a lot of the issues of admissibility or on foundation for and demonstrative evidence. This was a case from 1987 where a child was struck and killed in an intersection in LA. She had, it was disputed as to fault. The police officer who investigated, as well as some eyewitnesses, stated that she was crossing against the traffic signal. However, the parents argued that despite the fact she was crossing against a signal, or at least the strong evidence that she was crossing against a signal, it was still in large part the driver's fault because he should have seen her. And this is an argument that comes up in our cases, and some very sad ones at that. The parents prevailed. They had a successful verdict, and they got 60% liability on the driver, and then the driver appealed. And one of the issues of appeal was on the video recreation of the accident that the parents' attorney introduced at trial. There were a number of objections to this video. It wasn't an animation, it was an actual video that was, its purpose was to recreate the circumstances of the accident. It was from the point of view of the driver as he approached that same intersection around that same time of day. And there was a girl in the crosswalk, not in the crosswalk, crossing the street in kind of a substantially similar way as that driver. The defendant in that case, who was appealing, had a number of issues with it. And all of it touched on whether this was actually substantially similar. First of all, the accident happened in October and the video was taken in June. So the sun was in a different place in the sky. The individual that was in the video was a full foot taller than the decedent. So they would argue that that would make for a more visible person in the crosswalk or in the street. There had been changes to the lane markings since the time of the accident. Traffic conditions were different. It was heavier. The camera was fixed on the intersection, meaning it wasn't moving. It was straight ahead in the video, whereas the human eye is not doing that. It's kind of moving around, checking in all the different stimuli. And then the last argument, I think, is a very creative argument. It's that the jury knew that the girl was wearing a red jacket. So they had been primed to expect to see someone wearing a red jacket. So when they're watching the video, after weeks of testimony about the girl in the red jacket, they see the car approaching and there's that red jacket. So they really makes it seem more conspicuous. With all of those novel, very creative arguments, the judge ultimately said, no, it was substantially similar to the conditions of the accident. Any of the differences go to the weight of the video, not the admissibility of the video. But in terms of the sun, for example, the judge said it was really inconsequential because in both circumstances, the sun wouldn't have been in the eyes of the driver. The lane markings weren't relevant to the circumstances of the accident. The judge said having the traffic different actually helped the driver in this video because it was heavier in the video than in real life. So in many ways that helped the jury or was favorable to the defendant. So De Rosario is a really good case to kind of run down all of the touchstones on admissibility. Earhart, I'll just quickly talk about this. This was a boating accident where I believe it was a woman lost I think it was a leg to a boat propeller when she was water skiing. She fell while water skiing and the boat backed up. And as it was backing up, she got hit by the propeller. And it was a product liability case against the boat manufacturer because according to the plaintiff, the boat basically was reversing when it shouldn't have been. It wasn't in gear to be reversing. And they were successful against the manufacturer. In this case, the demonstrative issue was that the expert for the defense had a demonstration where it showed a water skier that had crashed, and then the rope from the tow rope got wrapped on the propeller and brought the water skier into the propeller. And presumably this is to show an alternate explanation for this accident. And in that case, The judge did not let that demonstrative evidence in because there was no support for it by the evidence. There was no witness testimony to say, the boat, the tow rope got caught in the propeller. It was completely unsupported. So once again, when you're trying to gauge whether demonstrative evidence is going to be able to get into a case, it better be supported by evidence, by witness testimony at the very least. Photographs, this is pretty simple. It just needs to show what it says it shows. Oftentimes this is not in dispute. And there doesn't have to be, in that second paragraph, it doesn't need to be duplicated with precision. So for example, if you're showing the scene of an accident, they're not likely to have it excluded because it's, the foliage is different or the lighting is a little different. All of that will go to the weight. Models, it's the same thing. It just has to be a fair representation. People versus Ham was an interesting case because it was an armed robbery, a criminal case, obviously. And the victim in that case said, I was held up and it was either by a 22, someone was holding a small gun. It was either a 22 or a 25 caliber gun. And in that case, the lawyer showed, I believe, a 25, and the other side objected saying, well, we have no evidence whether it's a 22 or 25, and here you're showing a 25. And the judge ultimately said, it was substantially similar since those two guns, I'm not a gun person, so I don't know the difference, but I imagine they're both fairly small caliber guns. Whereas if someone had come in with an AR-15 and the evidence was testimony of a 22 or 25, clearly that wouldn't be admitted. Mannequins, this is all a very common law, we know, the mannequin body of law. No, I don't think this is a huge area to cover, but mannequins can be brought in for demonstration to show injury. And in this case, in People versus Cummings, it showed bullet trajectories. You've probably seen that either in real cases you've worked in or perhaps on TV or movies where they use those trajectory rods to show the path of the bullets. Last issue that I wanted to touch on in terms of kind of some of the law relating to demonstrative evidence. If you have a testifying witness and they make some sort of drawing or diagram while testifying, you need to preserve that. That's evidence. However, if it's not preserved by you, then that could be, you won't be able to use that at a later time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the actual whiteboard needs to be kept, but at least a photograph needs to be kept. Oftentimes the court will, and the court clerk will be handling that, but if they're not, you need to be on the lookout. So that really covers generally how to get this in, or the standards for getting it in. A word on that, I always encourage attorneys to broach this issue as soon as possible with opposing counsel. Ideally, these come in through stipulation. As you get closer to trial, they're going to have things that they need to get into, and hopefully you have a professional relationship where you're both kind of working towards the same goal of putting on your same case and not unnecessarily throwing on roadblocks. And so you're stipulating to each other's where appropriate. Of course, if they had a demonstrative evidence item that was not a fair representation or argumentative, then an objection would be appropriate. But if you're objecting simply for the purpose of objecting, just get ready for your exhibits to reach that same fate with them. So it's best to work with opposing counsel, get as many stipulations as possible. And you'll have to figure out what's going to come into trial, through in limines or 406, 402 hearings, if you can't stipulate. I wanted to show just a couple examples of some illustrations that our office has turned out. The ones I'm about to show are actually from one of Adam's cases that he got a great result on. It was an industrial accident against a third party. So this is a chart, an illustration of a gentleman's spinal injuries and some of the treatment he received. And as both Adam and Ethan hit on, these sorts of visuals are just so much more powerful than just reading about it on paper. You could have in your mediation statement or in your trial brief, left facet joint steroid injection, but what does that actually look like? That means a large gauge syringe going into your spine. It's a very invasive procedure, and this sort of illustration demonstrates that. So the demonstrations can be on damages or liability. Both are very powerful. Here's another one that Adam did in that same case. It's a timeline of treatment. So this is a really good visual representation of how much treatment this client had to endure. For example, if you look in this 2017 and 2018, those are all the different appointments that this individual had. So for example, in June and July, they had 15, 16 medical appointments that they had to go to. This is just a much more compelling way to show that the client was constantly going in and out of the doctor's office, and that this was a huge disruption to their life. I'm running out of time. What I wanted to do is just show a couple small segments from a video made by Samir Lyons. Samir Lyons works for Trial Ready Pro. They do have a number of trial support services, but Mr. Lyons is a forensic animator, and he and Adam did an interview a little while ago that I was going to show in its entirety. It's about 10 minutes. I don't think we have time for that. What I will do, though, is just skip to some of the animations that he did, so you can get a sense of other kinds of demonstrative evidence that can be really helpful in your case. At least one of them is on liability, how an accident happened, and one is on damages, showing what a surgery actually looked like. So let me cue that up real quick. Get this down. All right. I apologize. Adam's interview was scintillating with Mr. Lyons, but we're just going to go to the animations here.
This one, we're just trying to convey so in this one, I just wanted you to check it out first. We're obviously just trying to convey liability and clearly show the events of this incident. I'll play it one more time here from the beginning. And in this particular case, we did create a few other deliverables. We had a different camera angle, and we also stopped this animation various times to show a few more details, exactly how far the Nissan was to a turn.
So that animation is a good example of a demonstrative evidence or demonstrative video that shows how an accident likely happened. It would be supported by accident reconstruction experts. And the accident reconstruction experts are the ones who provide all of the inputs to the animation company, the times, the speeds, the distances, everything about the accident, weather conditions, and then the animators take all of that data and synthesize it and do it in as accurate a representation as possible. And once again, the more accurate it is, the more likely it would eventually be admitted into trial. And then the second one is showing a surgery. So once similar to the illustration with Adam's spine case, this is another spinal injury case, but this is an actual video showing a very invasive, I think this is a discectomy. So where someone had a disc removed and they might have even had some spinal fusion. So we'll just watch a little bit.
And you know, this kind of drags on for a few minutes, but really the idea here is obviously in this specific one, actually.
Oh, and trigger warning, it looks cartoonish a little bit, but this is a little graphic. So I should have given you that preamble there.
Is to show what the patient had to go through as a result of the accident. And so because of that, we want to make sure that we're showing things in a way that doesn't look pretty. Nothing about this is pretty. You know, when you open somebody up, it can be pretty disgusting. And I think that's a very important piece to.
So it goes on, but you get the idea, and it becomes even more kind of cringeworthy where you're seeing actual portions of the spine tissue being removed. All of that, you could say it, you could write it in a mediation statement, you can tell it to a jury, but actually showing them what it looks like through a visual, through an animation that's admitted into trial or short of that at a mediation can be really powerful in your case. It's now 6 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up. Adam, did you have any closing remarks?
No, that was it's really good to see these presentations. There's some really slick things that were going on with iPro. The highlights of the text call outs and also like the call outs of the video is really, really neat. Definitely, can use iPro and Trial Direct 360 to help. And yeah, rumor has it is visuals are important. So get on it. Really enhances the value of your case. You got to spend money to make money. And I think spend money on the visuals is really important. It's really a big part of our cases, our practice. That interview, that was Sam Lyons that you heard from Trial Ready Pro. I like them. I see I think there's nothing wrong from just going on Google and Googling, forensic animation company, and then they all have their websites and you can see what their deliverables, as they call them, I guess, what their deliverables are, what it looks like. They have samples and you can reach out to these different companies, get some quotes, see who you want to work with, see what they can offer for you. And like Nick said, and we've been talking about early and often, get it. If you have a strong case, get it very early, use it often, send it with a demand before litigation, get a bunch ready for mediation, do all those things to show the other side that you have the goods and that you're going to make a really good presentation to the jury. I think it does go a long way with convincing people you need to convince, whether it's a jury or the other side, convincing them that you have not only a strong case, but that you're going to present it well. And so thank you to the panelists for the presentation on trial presentations. Hopefully you all learned something from our presentation. And if you want to check out some of the other topics that were in this series, just go on to the Contra Costa County Bar website and see what they are. If you don't remember what they were, then when I listed them. And thank you again to Ann and iPro for sponsoring this, and Ann for putting this together.
Well, thank you guys. I know this isn't Nick's first program, nor is it yours. So you guys have been really instrumental in providing a lot of expertise. but I would like to find out how we can get in touch with Mrs. Carlson. That was great. That was great.
Yeah.
She's great. And we'd love to have her present again. If she wants to do a full thing on just PowerPoint practice, I think we could do that. Just, in
Yeah.
presentations or whatever. I think that might be a bigger program. So you can
turns
moderate, Adam, but we'd want
Yeah.
her to do the full presentation.
turns out she is someone who will basically do anything that I ask. So
Aw.
if it's what we want, she'll do it.
That's great. Well, thank you guys very much. Everybody have a great evening, and I'll get these fine gentlemen to send me some materials, and we'll get them out to you as soon as we can. Okay?
Go
Have a
Warriors.
great evening.
Go Rangers. What are you talking about?